there is some really well thought out material for you. If you'll read that book, it will give you some just some insights into sometimes why we do what we do, how to help you do better, what you do as a leader in a group, small group. And so I know it says Sunday school, but it goes beyond just that in group, leading a group. So grab that, read that. Today, we are going to be moving fairly fast. We have 5 presenters, as you can see, and you're going to have time at your table for discussion. And so you're going to have to stay awake and keep moving along as we present today. So let me stop real quick. I'm not sure if there's anything else I need to say other than that. Oh, yes, there is. If you need to get up and go to the restroom, please get up and go to the restroom when you need to go. We will have break time today, but if you need to get up, the food back there is going to be there all morning, so get back and get what you want, come back and forth. And no one's going to get offended if you get up to go grab something. We don't want you hangry sitting there. We want you engaged, okay? So let's stop, open with the word of prayer, and then Dave's coming up. Lord God, I thank you for the grace that you have offered us, that we can gather in a place like this. We can learn and grow, become better at what you've given us to put our hands to. Lord God, I pray that we would listen to your voice today, that you would speak very clearly, and we would become even more effective in reaching people, drawing them in, and helping them become part of the community of faith in smaller groups. Lord, thank you for this time. In Jesus' name, amen. Dave, you ready to go?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for showing up this morning, for attending this workshop. I hope you guys will get a lot out of it. If you've got your handouts guide with you, there's a page on there that talks about core concepts. I'm going to talk about just journey group overview, and we're going to get into some drill down into some specifics that the other presenters are going to talk about this morning. But I wanted to talk just briefly about the 3 key areas that you see show up in here. We all know that our groups are very unique. Each group has something unique about it: age, other demographics, work, children, no children, things like that. And so we also have a lot of common traits involved too, a lot of common things that are consistent from group to group. And I wanted to look at these, what I call core concepts. You'll see on that page that we talk about Bible study, obviously important to communicate God's word during that group time. Prayer, that's prayer. And just as we talk to God individually and communicate to God individually through prayer, it's important that we do so in the group environment too, corporately. Not only are we sending up a lot of prayer up to God, but we're also sharing what concerns us, things of that nature, make us aware of what's going on in each other's lives within the group. That's powerful. That builds relationships, things of that nature. We also have an outreach aspect to group life. Outreach, all of our groups, we should be involved in some evangelistic outreach to the community. Sometimes we have entire church outreach events that happen. I encourage the group leaders to encourage your members of your group to be involved in those when they come along. Also, sometimes groups will engage in individual evangelistic and outreach efforts, and that's wonderful too. That really makes the group a tight-knit group of folks. Group care. Group care is pretty self-explanatory. It's taking care of one another within the group environment. And so you see somebody who hasn't been in group for 2 weeks, you give them a call, you write them an email. If you're under 30, you send them a text or a Facebook, something like that. Old people like me, we don't understand. But however you communicate, it's important to communicate to those group members and make sure they know that you care. And I think a lot of our groups do a pretty good job on that. The social aspect or fellowship, you want to make sure that you have some time, maybe not on a Sunday, but sometime you have to have set aside some time to build those relationships within the group in a social kind of environment. Ministry service, I've told my group several times in the past that my best day teaching is when nobody shows up to my group, because they're all spread out throughout the church during that hour engaged in ministry. If they're doing that, I've done my job as a group leader. I encourage everybody to encourage your group members to be engaged in ministry service. If they have to get up and leave early, or they have to come in late to group because they're engaged in ministry within the church, that's okay. We need to give them the freedom to do that. We should encourage that kind of thing. Leaders in training. These last couple of aspects, leaders in training and the planting groups, both of those are kind of future-oriented kind of things. So what we mean by that is leader in training, it's kind of obvious. You want to have a leader or a backup leader. Some of our groups have 2, sometimes 3 leaders already. And so if one person's not there on a Sunday during group time, the backup is right there. You got it. In the manufacturing environment, we call that a hot standby. They're ready to go. They're ready to jump in a moment's notice. That's important, and not only from the standpoint of a substitution kind of thing, but it's also to get someone in a rotation of teaching, if you possibly can, get them into a rotation so that people can start seeing another face other than the primary teacher's face in that group. You're also raising up the next group leader by doing that, a possible group leader for a new group down the road, which leads us into planning groups. In the past, the word splitting group has been a negative impact. We're not going to call it splitting. I call them planting groups. My approach and my thinking is that just as we plant churches, think about what has to happen in order to plant a new church. You take people from an existing church, you put them into the new church, they seed that church ministry. The same thing can happen in a group environment, only on a smaller scale. And so we want to keep that in mind. Some of these other aspects that we want to look at is group uniqueness. So we looked at the common things that are amongst all groups. So group uniqueness, though, as we talked about, we've got age impacts, mobility impact. Some of our groups are senior groups, and so they need to be close to the facilities. They need to be have an easy access to their classroom because of mobility issues. The classroom itself has to be big enough to support wheelchairs and walkers and things of that nature. So that's all critical. And so we need to be thinking about both of those aspects. The other thing is a study approach. And the real issue here is for the group leaders to understand thoroughly how their group is made up. What is the most effective way to reach and communicate to that group with the Word of God? How can you communicate that as a teacher and as a leader to them in the most effective manner? And so there's different approaches. And you're going to see us focus in on some of these with Pastor George is going to talk about some study approaches, learning plans, and so forth. And Kailee and Kelcey and Tevin are also going to talk about some individual components. So I'm just giving you kind of a brief overview. The group interaction, obviously, group interaction may be different between your group and my group, or between any other group. It's going to be a different dynamic at play. I like to use the word dynamic because it carries with it the idea of changing. It's fluid. Groups are a living, breathing organism, you might say. I asked my wife just before I left home if we had a lava lamp at home. I was going to set it up here. And you know what lava lamps look like, and it's constantly moving. It's fluid. It's in motion. Sometimes you'll see a little piece of that glob inside there break off. That's planting a new group. So a lava lamp, think lava lamps when you think of the fluidity of a group and the dynamic aspect of groups. and how they're constantly changing, meeting different needs within the group, different needs of people within the group, different curriculum, things like that. The last major area that I wanted to talk about was group awareness, and then we're going to get into a little exercise, a workshop exercise at our tables. So the group awareness, basically, one of the biggest things that I wanted to stress this morning was time. We need to, as leaders in the groups, we need to really encourage our members and to start on time so we can finish on time. The impacts of that are this: if we don't finish on time, there are other people in other ministries waiting for your group members to get there for a handoff. There are people within your groups that have other ministry responsibilities they need to get to. And then, of course, if you're heading to worship service, doesn't God want us to be on time to worship Him on a Sunday? I think He does. And so that's critical. That's important. So just kind of keep an eye on the time. Our official times are 8 o'clock to 9:15 on Sunday mornings. You got an hour and 15 minutes. Some groups just go an hour, and that's fine. Then you got the 9:30 to 10:45, and then you got the evening group, which is only 1 hour in length, which is 5:30 to 6:30. But all three of those group periods allow for 15 minutes to get to worship service or to your next ministry responsibility. Classrooms, as many of you've already seen or will see tomorrow, the classrooms we've started the upgrades on the classrooms, and they look really nice. The carpeting's in, some of the classroom walls have been painted. There's a brand new cabinet in each room that's compartmentalized for the 3 group periods and for the Wednesday night discipleship classes that might be in that room. So we just want to make sure that I'm an old Boy Scout, and they always taught us, always leave the area cleaner than when you found it. And I want to pass on that Boy Scout mentality to all of you, and just always make sure that we clean up any papers, cups, stuff like that, anything on the floor, because somebody else, another group, is coming in behind you in most cases. So it's really important. And it's also being a good steward of what God's blessed us with here at Highway. I mean, we really have been blessed with wonderful facilities here in the classrooms. So keep that in mind. Another big thing to remember, I think, is that these are multi-use rooms. On the one hand, we take ownership. A lot of times we'll take ownership as a class of a room, and that's wonderful. That means we care about the facility, we care about the room, but at the same time we have to remember that that's our room for 1 hour or 1 hour and 15 minutes, and then somebody else is coming in after us, and then that's going to be their room for that length of time. It's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you want to do the best you can and kind of personalize it, but on the other hand, you got to realize that the next group is coming in too. So just a reminder. We have the curriculum. As you already know, we have curriculum that every other quarter we change off from Lifeway curriculum to in-house created highway curriculum. A lot of the highway curriculum we use, we refer to it as our DNA curriculum. It's like the very basic stuff that people need to know. And the church is dynamic as a whole, just as the groups are dynamic. We constantly see new faces coming in. They need to understand our DNA. They need to understand how Highway thinks and functions, and what our beliefs are, and what our approach to ministry is. So that's important. And so you'll see these 13-week periods. The summer curriculum is in the back. For those of you that haven't got yours yet, you can pick it up. And we're going to a Lifeway series this quarter. We usually have some leftover study guides. If you have those, if you can get those to me, I sure would appreciate it. We want to forward those on to nursing homes, any place that will be in need of those study guides. If you can think of any place, let me know. And then I'm not going to talk about the backup leaders much, because we already kind of covered that. It's important that we can have a backup leader in training. The worst thing that could happen on a Sunday would be to cancel a group just because we don't have a leader for that group. I encourage leaders to raise up their group leaders from within. I I don't want to be scrambling on Sunday morning when I'm also leading my own group and then trying to hunt down substitutes. I don't, that's not my approach. That's not what I'm used to. I encourage you guys to raise your own leaders up and make sure they're ready to go. The other thing I would point out is in your guide, you'll see the spring quarter group listing, and that group listing gives you a great idea, gives you a good feel for the fact that we're not an island. Sometimes I get in that mentality where I think of just my own group, but I have to remember that there's 17 other groups out there, 16 other groups out there that they have unique dynamic to them too. And maybe you might have somebody come into your group on a Sunday that maybe there's a better fit for them in another group. Encourage that. I encourage them to go to another group. Don't let them drop off the face of the earth, whatever you do. We want them to stay in group. Okay, we're going to back up a little bit. We're going to look at, earlier on, before we got to this section, you'll have a journey group overview. And we want to take about 10 minutes just to discuss that within your own groups. Some of the ideas that we just talked about with the core concepts, you'll see embedded in these questions, the group uniqueness and the group awareness. So why don't we take about 10 minutes and then kind of discuss it amongst yourselves too at the tables. Get as far as you can get on these, and then if you can't finish them all, I would encourage you to take a look at these when you get home and just consciously think about your group and how it fits into these different ideas. So why don't we just take a break and do that?
That's it.
Party group, all right.
One of the things I think, particularly those of us concerned with third body, all of our folks are old. Some of those folks have some of those folks they're retired on that. We've got one person in our group who don't have to return that.
I was like, oh yeah, yeah, I used to do that.
She was maybe encouraged to study.
We gotta find someplace.
The answer reason to that was they don't want you to know.
Hey, it's a nice, it's just. I mean, they're pretty open about letting us in.
Are you married or all?
I think when they get married, they make us. Yeah, they're all.
My wife is there is a
Because we have so it freaks you out if you have to go. So like Simon, Simon Day, that's when they get married. That's or like they're about to get married.
everybody in the class is ordered.
It's pretty cool.
So I get to the point where most of them will want to become. That's from this group of folks. And our age range is 18 to 20. So everything from there all the way up to just
Average is probably
yeah, right now is what it is.
We used to have other churches come to ours. So we have like there's a couple of churches. There's a church in Phoenix. Those are like two of the main churches that will come do stuff. But yeah, I think
Well,
we
folks,
actually-
I wish we had more time for this exercise. We're moving right along, like Pastor said we would, from a time standpoint, but I hope that you may have picked up something new in discussing it with other group leaders at your individual tables, and take these home with you and kind of concentrate on them a little bit as it applies to your group. Just a couple other quick things I wanted to point out to you. You notice that everybody's sitting you're not sitting with your normal peeps. Everybody's kind of broke up into different tables. You got that color-coded book that we gave you for free. That's by design in order to mix everybody up so that we've got some younger group leaders with older group leaders and everywhere in between. It also fosters the idea of team. We are a team. We're a team of teachers and a team of leaders, and there's some security in that, knowing that we're not alone. We're not an island out there with just our group. Other groups and other group leaders, they have the same kind of challenges or different challenges than what we may have for our group, but it's a way for us to understand some of those other challenges that other group leaders might have. The handing out of the curriculum for the summertime, for the summer quarter, I also want to make a visual statement with that to show people when you see that table back there, it's not just your set of books back there. There's all these different books back there. Some of them are young adult books, some of them are senior books, some of them are the standard middle of the road books for who are not in the other two categories, but it shows the diversity that we have amongst our groups. And thank God for that diversity, because we are diverse in our group so we can reach a diverse group of people within the church body. So that's important. And the other thing is that you'll hear me use the term, you'll see it in my email writings too, I interchange the terms leader and teacher quite a bit. Because I think that a teacher is a leader, and I think that a leader is also a teacher. And so, while we call our, if you're teaching a group or leading a group, we call ourselves group leaders, and that's the whole design of the group. That includes stuff other than just the Bible study that we talked about in the core concepts. And then from a teacher standpoint, it's the teaching of God's Word and communicating that, whether it's directly through Scripture or by way Scripture by way of our study curriculum for that quarter. So kind of keep that in mind that teachers are leaders and leaders are teachers, and so that's important. I am about 1 minute early, I think, and so Pastor's going to be really proud of me because I tend to be a long talker. So I'm going to turn it over to Pastor George, and he's going to talk to us about lesson planning.
So I had heard about this guy. I didn't know exactly who he was, but I'd heard the stories, and I was on Facebook enough to know that I'd seen these stories about what he could do. It was incredible, but you wouldn't read about it in the news because the religious leaders were suppressing his teaching, and he was going about healing people, and so he would heal people, and they would just start spreading that news around. So there was a buzz. And I understand he was headed to Jerusalem. And he was going to go through our town, and I was like, okay, I've at least got to see him. I got to see who this is. The problem was people didn't like me. I worked for the IRS, and people didn't like me, and I wasn't big to begin with. And because I wasn't very big, all these throngs of people I knew were going to crowd around, so I thought ahead. If I can go up, I know there's only one route out of town that he's going to take, and I can climb up on a light pole, and I know I'll be high enough up above the crowd because no one will let me in. And I know I'll at least be able to see him, because I've heard people say if you just see him, it changes your life. So the day came, and the people were abuzz, and it was crazy. All these people were already making their way to Jerusalem, and he was on his way. And he came through town, and he got to that place where I was, and I was looking down, and I could see him in the crowd, and it's getting bigger and bigger as he gets closer. And then when he got right under where I was, he stopped. And he looked up, and he called me by name. And he said, come down, I'm going to your house today. All right, in your groups, very quickly. What is the Bible story? Where's it found? And why did that story grab your attention? Very quickly. Very quickly. Time's running. 1 minute. Why did it grab your attention?
The way it grabbed our attention, though, is when you presented it.
So cute.
It was just at Facebook.
She didn't freeze it.
Why did it grab your attention? You should be about done. Come on. All right. What was the story? Zacchaeus. Where's it found? Luke 19. Okay, Luke 19. And what grabbed your attention very quickly? Come on, pop off. Let's go. Modernized it. Okay. Builds upon it. Okay. Mystery. Started with a mystery. What's that?
First person.
Okay, it was first person. Okay. What else? Was it? I was enthusiastic. I was expressing. Okay, I was emotive. So we won't get a whole lot into that, but that's that beginning. We have in this process lesson planning. So you should be on preparing the lesson. That is the page you should be on. We're going to work through that. There's some places for you to fill in. That first thing at the top is the objective. Learn the basics of a structured lesson plan by understanding and implementing presentation components. That is what we're going to do in this next 14 minutes now. We're going to talk about that very quickly. Okay? So we're going to work on that. Lesson planning basics. Failing to plan is planning to fail. You probably heard that in other things. And it works the same, but we really ought to consider that this is God's word we're working and teaching, and it's important. So if we fail to plan, we're gonna plan to fail in leading our group, and we're not gonna reach where we need to go, the objective. So my objective today, that's the first thing. The objective is the point. It's the big idea, the purpose of outcome that we're trying to seek, the thing we want to learn the group members. It's our aim. It's what we want to learn. It goes in that blank. We want to learn them. Okay? Am I right? Yeah. And so the entire lesson environment, everything we're doing in that classroom session that day is guided by that objective. Everything you do points to that objective. Whatever types of strategies you use, whatever teaching methods you use, however you do that, points toward the objective. It's our context. What is the context of your lesson? So you get in, what does the Bible passage instruct us to do? What is the Bible passage saying to us? What is needed to be done or observed in our life? Because that's why we approach the Word of God. What is God saying to us? And that's how you develop the objective. You come from the Word of God and say, what's it telling us today that we need to know, that we need to walk out of here? And how can I point every aspect of what I'm doing in this hour toward that objective? Second thing is introduction. This is the hook or the connection. It's basically saying, what are we going to learn today? What are we going to learn about? The objective or the introduction is to gain the interest of people. My introduction, I think it gained your interest. What is he going to do today? What is he going to present? And so this introduction also says, how might I introduce this study? What can I do to start my group thinking about what we will learn? What can I get the processes and the juices going? How can I point that out? So when my introduction came up, all right, what's going to happen today? What are we going to learn? How am I engaging you to begin to think about this whole structured time that we have together? It's short. What does that introduction do to get that process? Okay? Next is instruction. Instruction. This is the hook or the inspection. It answers this question: what are we learning? What we are learning? Dyslexic moment there. What does the group need to learn about the material or the Bible passage? So here's the picture as you're getting ready and you're saying, what are we going to teach? You can read this passage and you can get all these great nuggets and you get all these truths and begin to write them out. And what you do when you come to this idea of instruction is you want to get the biggest nuggets. So you sit there and you sift. You have all this stuff that you can present. You have all this stuff that you can do. You have all these facts or all this information. And it's like you have these sifters that run down, and you have one, and you get the big rocks in that top one. And then it's a little finer, and you're collecting the next group of rocks, and then you're getting a little bit further down. So you want the big nuggets. So you begin to do this introduction thing with the big nuggets, and then you begin to fill in with some of the other nuggets that'll be important, because you only have a certain amount of time. You don't want to spend your time in instruction doing all kinds of other things and never get to your objective. That would be a waste of time. So you plan and you get ready, and your instruction time, you're saying, this is what we're learning. This is what God has taught us. What Bible verses do I want to focus on? Right now in our lessons, there are so many Bible verses that we could. You guys are teaching, oh my, I'm overwhelmed. Well, what are the ones that are going to teach the objective that you say this is important? What's going to be the biggest nugget, the biggest takeaway? And then what is the best way to help my group members understand and apply the objective, what we're learning? Well, what's going to be the best way that I can help them as we're going through this process to grasp it and to say, okay, I got it. Okay, there. Okay, now I'm understanding. Well, question to ask during this is, who are my learners? And what method will work best in this process? What method will work best in this process? We'll talk a little bit more. But that is the idea of instruction. And then finally is closure, took, or reflection. What we will do about what we just learned. So wrapping up the learning with questions or activities that are going to help your learner.
All right, let's make our way back to our seats. We do have prizes for you, so thank you for coming. So we have a couple different variables that we'll give away at each one. Our starting ones are free drinks at our coffee shop. We want to make sure that you know that we have a coffee shop to help fundraise for missions. We also have Bibles we're going to be giving away. So let's give our first one. So our first one's a free drink at the coffee shop for Tyler Ritchie. You want to give it to him?
Shannon's gonna enjoy that.
Shannon will love that. All right, our next free drink goes to Alyssa. All right, and then we want to make sure we're giving away Bibles because we have some nice Bibles to give away. So our first one is a CSB Thin Line. So if you want to track with Pastor George during his sermons, this is a great Bible for you. This goes to George Corgi. I don't know if it's large print. Later today we have study Bibles and a pastor's Bible so that you can make sure George is doing things right. Amen. All right, our next speaker is Tevin. You're well liked.
Nice. Now I got to live up to that. Okay. All right. So we are on presentation and engagement. So I see some of you flipping in this. Would you take this book just for a second and close it? Sorry. So it'll be kind of interesting. I like following Pastor George with this piece of it because a lot of what he focused on, we cover in a different way. So for me, the idea is focus. When you're thinking about how am I presenting to this group, how am I engaging this group, you're thinking about some of the things that he talked about, but you're identifying how do I focus? How do I bring what I'm trying to say to these specific individuals? You have to know your people. You have to do life with, if possible, do as much life with them as you can. Now, my goal for this session is to not talk very much, so hopefully I can follow through on that, because I want you guys to have some good discussion at the end. We'll do it a little bit differently. I'm kind of just introducing the discussion to this session. And if you did look ahead, kudos, you're a gold star. Good job. But there is a little, and it's not very lengthy, but there is a handout in there to go through and determine your personal learning style. So we're going to be talking about learning styles. And some of you may already be familiar with this, but it's really important because then you know, hey, what's my natural bent as a leader? And what kind of people am I going to be able to engage with easier? And what kind of people is it going to be hard for me to do? And do I need to focus more on in my preparation? So without further ado, let's move on. I'm curious, anybody here ever played the game Monopoly? Okay, a few of us. Some of us have been playing it maybe for the last 30 years. This is a game that can take forever, but the question I have for you is, as a leader, are you a facilitator or are you a monopolizer? So the way that I would say is when you're playing the game of Monopoly, sometimes we look at our groups and we look around at all these bright faces staring back at us and we think, I have to impart God's truth to these people. Yes, we want to do that. But if I'm the only one talking and everyone else leaves and they've been talked at, I'm the person in Monopoly that has cleaned everyone out, and usually people aren't very happy with that person, right? Marriages are a little fraught afterwards. Friendships, hopefully you don't leave them at the door. No, I almost look at it as we are the banker in Monopoly. We're still part of the game, and it's an important part, but we facilitate. Others are playing. They're engaging with it. And we're determining, okay, here's the things that I can give to you. You take it. Do with it as you will. We're the encouragers. So that's an important piece. Moving right along then. So here's kind of an important piece, and sometimes this is uncomfortable, but do you guys know that Simon and Garfunkel song, The Sound of Silence? Are you singing it already? Okay, good. I literally, oh yeah, well, no, the original's better. The sound of silence, though. Sometimes in groups, we think that maybe we're trying not to monopolize the conversation, but we think that, hey, there's silence, people aren't getting it, and we're panicking mentally. Like, oh no, I gotta fill the gaps. I can hear the crickets now. But sometimes silence is the best teacher of all. Because it's in those moments when people can really be thinking. And hopefully, they're not, sleeping or something else, but praying. They're praying with their eyes closed. But I think in a group setting like this, a lot of times people are just taking it in. And maybe you as a group, and Pastor George got at this, maybe you as a group leader need to say, hey, this person, I can tell you're thinking about this. Talk us through what you're thinking about. Obviously you want to be careful with that. Some people wouldn't appreciate being put on the spot in a group setting. But we want to be facilitators. We're bringing out the conversation. Because ultimately, if people are in a group and talking together and learning from each other, that's going to be more powerful. Usually when you're in a group setting, I find this at least, the things that you remember the most are the things you have said out loud. I'll say that again. The things you remember the most are the things you've said out loud. And so sometimes it can be powerful to have people, hey, say this with me if you really want them to remember it. Or I need to hear your opinion. You've been quiet this whole time. I know you've got something good going on. Let us in on what you're thinking. So you're bringing people along, but you're leaving space in the conversation. Silence isn't always a bad thing. And then digging deep. And we'll get at this a little bit more. These are two of the learning styles. But it's important if someone gives an answer, sometimes we can get into that school setting. I'm the teacher, these are all the students, and they have now given me the right answer. I'll check the box, I'll move on. I would encourage us to get beyond that. If somebody gives an answer, and especially, you can kind of tell when somebody says something that is almost like a rote response. Maybe they've said it 1,000 times before and they're not really feeling it, but they just know this is what you... Ask them why. Ask them how. Ask them to explain it. Dig deep into the soil of their thought process. That's where people are really... When you see people like they're answering you and all they're doing is they're just kind of looking at you, usually they're not really thinking about it. But if they're kind of staring off a little bit and their brain is working, they're mulling over it, that's where the transformation can happen. Romans 12 talks about this, right? There's a renewing of the mind that has to happen first so that we can be changed in our lives. So that's an encouragement that I would have for you as well. And then finally, we're going to be digging into learning styles a little bit more. So you can pick these up now. There is a handout, like I said, in here. So you can flip to this page, presenting and engaging. Now, I'm just going to take a couple minutes to go over this as an overview. So don't start filling this out yet, because we're just going to do an overview, and then I'll give you probably a solid 5 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that. Go through this and really take a little bit of time with it. If you haven't engaged with this and really helped to determine what is my learning style of these four, so we're not talking about like auditory, visual, kinesthetic, a little bit different here in terms of learning style, but again, this really helps with trying to decide, how do I connect with people? Who is easy for me to bring along and who is maybe more challenging? And even start thinking about the people in your groups. And then at the end, we'll definitely have some time for discussion as well, because like I say, it's most memorable when it's something you said, or something that really, hey, that person said it in a way that I hadn't heard before. Okay, so let's take a quick peek at this. 4 different learning styles. There's the dynamic. So the dynamic learner is someone that is thinking about, what do I do with this? What can this information become? So again, this is not necessarily how do I soak up information. This is my focus with this information now, like what I most gravitate towards when I'm hearing it. Okay, the dynamic learner, what can this become? They're thinking about how do I take this and do something with it. The imaginative learner, and these top two are people who work well with others. They kind of need to be in a group dynamic. So the dynamic learner, the imaginative learner. Now imaginative learners, sometimes it's hard to bring them back a little bit because they're fun, they're lively, they're friendly, they get going. They might have a story for everything. They might be your talkers in your group. But they might ask that question, why? Why do I need to know this? Hey, this is great information you're giving me, but why are we talking about this? You need people like this in your group, and if you're not like this, again, it's important to be digging in for your imaginative learner's sake, and asking them follow-up questions like, why do you say that? Okay, down at the bottom left then, the common sense learner, they kind of cut right to the chase. They say, how does this work? So, okay, maybe you've given me some information, but walk me through it step by step. How does this work? If you can't tell, some of our presenters, I think, would be more on this dynamic and common sense side of things. And then finally, we've got the analytical learners, and I would put myself in this category, but it's thinking about what do I need to know. Now, and sometimes this is the kind of person to reach easiest with like a lecture style or like traditional educational models, because they can learn things strictly by hearing it and kind of soaking it in and thinking, okay, now I've got the truth and I'm good. So maybe that's a good baseline, because then you think, okay, this is what you have. Why do I need to know it? How can I move on with this? How does this work? Breaking it down, kind of tinkering with it almost for the common sense learner. And then finally, the dynamic learner, what can it become? Where do I go with this? That's kind of the application at the end. Okay, so again, hopefully that was good enough so you can kind of know more about it. Now I'm going to walk you through this handout just briefly. Under the presenting and engaging portion, there's 4 different learning styles. I want to say there's like 8 questions or something, 7 questions on each of these learning styles. Now you'll notice at the top there's 4 different categories, so 4 different letters that you can put in for each of these statements. So it's kind of like a personality type quiz. There's a V if it's very much like you. So you read the statement, you're like, that is me to a T, put a V down. If it's an M, it's moderately like me. I kind of do that in some situations, but in others, no. S would be somewhat like me. And so like, usually I'm not like that, but yeah, I do that sometimes. N is not at all or very little like me. So like, that's kind of the opposite of who I am. You would have put an N down. Now, I'll kind of cut to the chase on this. You want to put a sizable portion of V's and N's. If all you have are M's and S's, so the gushy middle, and you can't decide, maybe you're the 5th learning style, and that's, you need to focus on learning more. No, just kidding. That was a joke. Yeah. So M's and S's, again, aren't as helpful, because at the end, the way you score this in each of these categories is you're just counting up the number of V's, which means that thing is very much like you, and then you're counting up the number of N's, which means it's not like you. And so obviously you want to compare that. If you have a bunch of V's in one of these areas, then that's probably your learning style. If you have a bunch of N's in one of these areas, that's probably the learning style that would be most difficult for you to reach in your group setting as a leader. So again, we're going to have some discussion after this, so take a few minutes. We've got a little bit of time here. I really, sometimes with these we have a tendency to just kind of fly through it, and that's okay if that's what you want to do. But take a few minutes and go over this. I'll bring us back, and then we'll do some discussion here at the end. And the third discussion question of, I think we've got 4 different questions here. The third one will have to do with this assessment, if you will, this handout. So go ahead and take a few minutes, dig into these learning styles, and then we'll bring it back. All right. Hey, I hate to interrupt awesome discussion. Thanks for entering into that, guys. Just a couple quick pieces of feedback, if you would be gracious enough. Was there anything that kind of stuck out to you? Maybe it was something somebody else said that you hadn't heard it said that way. Maybe it was something you contributed to the group discussion. Anything that you pulled out of that group discussion just now? Yeah.
Simon said, when he teaches and someone answers a question, he asks them why do they say that? So he just doesn't leave it as a one answer type of thing, whatever the answer might be. When you say why, it starts getting the cogs going. Why do you say that answer? So I thought that was really, really neat, not just accepting the answer, but pulling it out.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yep.
Chris said that on that first question there, allow the silence with the answer. And I always struggle with that, so.
Yeah.
I did remind it that it works to facilitate meaningful discussion to allow the silence. It sounds contrary when you're trying to have a discussion, but
Yeah.
That's something to work on for sure.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else?
I think on the concept of asking the question and asking why, I think that's putting them on a spot. I think if you, before you start your questions, we're gonna ask some questions here, I want you to give us an answer and tell us why you think that way.
There you go.
Then you're
Lead in.
prepared, you're not put on the spot.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
You know, exactly.
That's good. Yeah. Because that's true. Some people can almost like, deer in the headlights, and now you've made them uncomfortable, and we all have our moments. Okay, well, I will turn it over to Kelcey then with group care.
All right, we're going to talk group care. Group care is a large area, and if you're doing it by yourself, you're probably not doing it well, no offense. But I think it takes a lot of people to do it, especially because you guys are volunteers, you're not paid to do this full time. And so it can take away from what's going on. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk through a couple different areas of group care. And a lot of it can be done by people in your group. So don't think you have to be the only one doing things in your group. This can be, for lack of a better term, subcontracted out to another person in your group who could do it well, and this can be their only activity in your group. And now you're involving more people, more leaders, and we're creating leaders for the future with doing this. The first one is prayer time. A big part of prayer time is it's for prayer requests, not gossip. A lot of times prayer time can fall into the gossip category, and I think when we start to gossip, we start to create discord among members, among leaders, we start to hurt people. And so one thing as a leader, whenever I do prayer time, when I get to go in and help like Nate with junior high guys, we let them tell us their prayer, but not tell us the story behind their prayer. If that makes sense. If they want to tell me a story, they can tell it privately, but not everyone in our group needs to hear the story about why your mom is going in to the woman doctor this week. I don't need to know that. That can be just between you and your mom, The whole group doesn't need to know that. If the person really thinks it needs to be shared, maybe pull them aside. Although that story actually may make more sense in a women's only Bible study. But in a junior high boys, it's confusing and weird. So we want to make sure our prayer requests are group appropriate if we're going to let them share a story. And that during this time, we're not bashing people. That helps us stay away from gossip time. I always make sure our small groups in youth, we do prayer times at the end. If we start with prayer time, sometimes prayer time can run 10, 20, 30 minutes, and you don't get time to get to the actual part of the Bible study. So what we do is we push so that we get 5 or 10 minutes at the end. We keep it short, that way it leaves no time for gossip. But I want to make sure people get their requests heard and that other people in the group can pray for them. So when we take prayer requests, we let someone write it down. In the junior high boys, last year we were in this first room. We selected one boy in the group to get to write it on the whiteboard. And every week we changed who got to write it, and it became a rite of passage. They all wanted to do that in Nate's group, was get to write on the whiteboard. But they wrote down the prayer requests so everyone could see them, we could pray over them. And then for our group, we send them out, direct message. You can DM people in youth group. In adult groups, we can send out an email. We can all write them down. But get the prayer requests out there, because if we're not following up with prayer, we're going to talk about that later, we're going to miss a lot of things and not get to see how God's moving in our group. Another thing to remember with your prayer time is don't just limit it to prayer requests. Add praise in there. It's good to know when a prayer was met, because that way we know we can celebrate together, and we can celebrate these little wins, and we can see, again, how God is moving in our group and how he's developing in our group. The next job that you can have is follow-up. So when it comes to follow-up, bad information is no information. So when you're collecting information from people, if it's bad information, how are you supposed to get in contact with them? So this is specifically with new people. That's where we want to see follow-up. So one of the jobs in your group is probably taking attendance, correct? Most groups have somebody who uses the phone, presses the faces and the names, make sure everyone's there. That way Dave can see how groups are moving. That person is a great person to take attendance. In your rooms, inside of the drawer, there's a little box that has a card. So underneath your booklet right now, you'll see that card. It's red, it says welcome card. If your group is technologically illiterate, this is the item for you. I didn't look at you. I just referenced you. It's different. So if your group is technologically illiterate, this is the item for you. We put them in every room because in case your room ever changes, it's there for you. It's in the drawer right in the middle. Make sure they do good handwriting, because when you turn this into Alyssa, many times me and Alyssa will sit there and debate, is this an L, a T, a K, or a P? We don't know, so we're taking shots in the dark, and so we have bad information. Because if you miss a letter on an email, it doesn't go to that person. If your 7 and your 1 look identical, the phone call doesn't happen. You get some random person. So if you see the person who's writing has terrible handwriting, maybe you should rewrite it for them, or ask if you could take their information when you're talking to them. Another one you can do is the person who's taking attendance, on the attendance phone. I took screenshots, we're going to walk through them. You can actually do it on there, and your phone, I don't have to interpret letters. So when you take attendance, the first thing you'll see is right here. This is our youth group one on Wednesday night. I took screenshots. So on the left, I have my attendance. You can see Nate's here, Simon's here, a bunch of kids are here. I'm going to slide down at the bottom. It says, have a new group member, add to group. You're going to click that little green thing. Go ahead and click it, Kailee. Boom. It's going to take you to this screen. So if you know that the person in your room has come to church before and checked in, they can use the QR code, or you can click the add by email or text, and you can pull up their name in the system, and it'll drop all their information in, and you don't have to do any extra work. It's done. If you know the person has never been to your group before, you can click on add a visitor, and it will add a visitor. You would just have to type in all the information, which can be tough. So we've created an easier way for those technologically advanced in the room. If you take your phone and open it, you can do it right now, and look at the QR code, see who knows what this is. So those who don't know how QR codes work, you open your camera up, you kind of hover over it, and then it'll drop a little item down. You click on it. It should open up a welcome card that's identical to the paper one in your folder, or in your drawer. And this card, go ahead, Kailee, click on it, has a welcome form. So because I'm already in the system, it says my information, it's already added it. But if a person uses their personal phone, it will autofill all this information for them. So they don't have to type it in. You don't have to misspell things. .com doesn't come across as .con. You know, we can email immediately. You can access their information. It will add their name, their phone number, their address, their gender. But we've added a thing on the bottom, which is, what is your preferred communication method? So if you have somebody who doesn't do email, that's a great option to click. Okay, they like postcard, church announcement, anything but email. You know, don't click on that one. If you have a teenager, they probably don't use email. So we're probably gonna like social media or text messages in the youth department, but for senior adults, it's gonna be different. So that helps us out. They can also add household members. So if they click, if they're a husband and wife group in there, they click add adult, it'll copy over all the information except for gender and their name, and they can add that. So it makes it super fast, super easy. But either way, the card or that works. When you go into your rooms, we've added that QR code you just saw on the cork boards. It'll say, welcome, you're a new member, you've never been here before, use this, and then tell your teacher. And then as the teacher, you can automatically add them after they filled out the card. They'll be in the system, just ask them their name. Because sometimes people put in weird information, like Joe's mom, or friend of Alice. And I delete those when I get in Monday morning because that's not good information. Because friend of Alice with no contact info, it's going to be weird for Pastor George to go, hi, friend of Alice, I don't know your phone number. So we're not going to contact you at all. The other part is we want to make sure when we're contacting people that we're contacting them well. So you're going to see a letter. Ignore that. A letter right here. This is what the youth group sends out when a new student shows up to youth group. So they come Wednesday night. Thursday morning, I send out a letter. You'll see in brackets, I put the student's name right there. The rest of this is stock, except in the middle of the first paragraph, it says something about student. So typically, if I saw something about the student, I'll write it in that gap. If an adult leader told me something, so we recently had a girl named Brooke show up to a prayer night in the youth room. Kailee told me she was sitting at a station with her and the girl drew really well. So I made sure I wrote in that section, hey, Kailee told me your drawing during your prayer time was super cool. I'd love to see what else you draw. And then the rest of the letter is stock. But when a child gets this, because we do mail these out, one of Alyssa's tasks is to stamp them. But we mail it out to students because we want them, one, to feel loved, but two, we want them to know when else we meet, because maybe they don't know. Maybe their mom and dad dragged them to a Sunday morning, or their grandparent dragged them in, and they're like, well, this is kind of dumb. It's kind of cool, we played some video games, we talked a little bit, but I don't know if that's for me. So it gives them other options. Hey, we do Wednesday nights, and then during the summer we add our summertime activities, so they know when they can show up, and that there's other things going on. We also, for someone who's there, send out a call, text message, DM. Our student leaders are supposed to, when a new kid shows up, talk to a new student and get their information for like, hey, what's your Instagram or your Snapchat? Now, most of your groups don't do Instagram or Snapchat, but an email works just the same, or a text message inviting them back. And this is something that Saturday night you send them an email or a text and say, hey, glad you showed up last week. We'd love to see you again tomorrow morning. Because it's a reminder, because maybe they forgot, maybe they were just visiting, maybe they were driving by and something tugged them into the church that day, so they don't think to come back again. We want to make sure people are coming back and they're coming, but we want to remember not to be Mormon when we contact them. What I mean by that is we're not evangelizing. Hey brother, let me tell you about my Lord Jesus Christ. If the person's not a believer, this may be a little aggressive. So don't come across Mormon, come across, hey, I'd love to see you come back tomorrow. We'd love to spend some time with you, and we really thought you brought something nice to Bible study last week. So we're not evangelizing in that moment. We want to set up a chance to evangelize later. If we scare them off too quickly, they might not be there. This is the old style of knocking on someone's door. Not being overly aggressive, but coming with a pie. That's what my church used to do when I was a kid. We showed up with a pie to your house. They can come off a little aggressive in the current day and age. So at your table, go ahead and turn and look at each other. We're going to talk for a second. All right, let's bring it back. So, follow-up is very specific towards new people to your group, or visitors, or people who come in. If you need information, once they've checked into your class, you can always access it from your email, because you can look at it on there. So if someone's checked in, you can check it there. Or you can call the office and say, hey, I had a new person come Sunday, and Alyssa can just scroll down, find visitor, and give you their information so that you can contact them back. Now let's talk about checkups, which is for people who come to our class regularly. So again, bad information is no information when it comes to checking out. So If I'm trying to check up with Simon because I heard he was sick, but he moved houses and I don't have his address, how am I supposed to go bring him a cup of soup? It's going to be difficult because I'm going to show up to the wrong house and some person's going to look at me really weird when I have this cup of soup for a sick person that doesn't exist. So, one thing we remember as group leaders, if you hear someone's moved, if you hear somebody's marital status has changed, if you hear there was somebody sick, it's good to update planning center. So you can update from the teacher side, or you can email the office or tell Alyssa and let her update it on her side. That way, when you go to find their information later, you can have good information. You know, they got a new phone service. They changed from Verizon to Sprint, and they had to get a new phone number. That's probably good to put in there, so that way you can get a hold of them when something happens. Other things we want to look at is how we contact someone who hasn't been there in a while. So if someone hasn't been to your group in over 3 weeks, Planning Center will alert you. Kind of cool. So in youth group, when someone hasn't been there, you'll see you have a postcard with you. I like to use current memes or create current memes. This one's not a real meme, I just created one. I have Grogu here. We miss you terribly to inspire kids because Star Wars is popular right now. But on the back side, there's some information. Hey, we haven't seen you in a while. We hope to see you again. Just in case you forgot, here's our times when we meet. You put their information there and mail it out. Really simple, really easy, but it reminds people that they still exist and they haven't been forgotten. Pastor George sends out different ones. He's created some on his computer that are specific to his group. But something like that is just an easy activity. I basically, when I get an alert on my computer, I write their name down and their information on the card. I have a couple printed at my desk. Then we stamp it, throw it in the mailbox, and it goes out. And I know that typically they get it unless it gets returned to me, which happens on occasion because sometimes bad information is no information. But so remember, other things you can do to contact people is I like to think every person in your group should be contacted monthly, even if they come regularly. So in youth group, our student leaders contact everyone to let them know, hey, we have an event coming up. Hey, we haven't seen you in a while. Hey, whatever. We want to hear that they're there. Something you could do in these follow-ups is follow up on prayer requests. So if you've taken prayer requests in your prayer time and you're like, okay, Aaron is struggling with classes because finals is coming up. Hey, I'm going to text Aaron this week and say, hey, how were finals last week at ASU? Did you pass all your classes, or are you retaking engineering 432? We don't know, but we want to make sure we're following up people so they know that we care about them. Because if your people don't think you care, they're not going to keep showing up to your class. Another thing you can do is life updates. So if you know someone just moved, hey, do you need help moving your house? Maybe we can contact the men's ministry and see if we can get some people to help you move. If you have an older class, hey, you need some weeds or some trees trimmed. Hey, let me contact Scott Swanson, because we have a group of guys who like to go do that for people. Let's make sure you get things taken care of. But we want to make sure we're taking care of our group in that sense. So knowing life updates and life needs, because that gets people to keep coming back and to think that our church cares about them more than just their money and their presence. We want people to know that we love them and not just want to use them. Our last section is investing. So, journey groups are about more than Bible knowledge. They're designed to connect and invest in people. So, one thing that you should know is if you're investing in someone, you should know what their outside interests are. If they do things outside of church, which they probably do, that's an easy way to invest in them. What do they do for work? What do they do for fun? One of the things, I come in on Monday morning and the counters are counting. There's 2 ladies in there who love baseball. If you didn't know, I love baseball too. So I usually go in there and talk to Deb and Tina about the Diamondbacks and the Cardinals, because they like those 2 teams. And so I'm investing in them, letting them know that I care about them and their wants and needs, and we get to talk a little bit of baseball, which is fun for me. And I'm in there for about 5 minutes, and then I disappear and go back to what I was doing. But they now know I'm involved in their life. Knowing someone's job is nice to know too. If you know somebody like Kelly Kimball, who plays in an orchestra nearby. When's her orchestra playing? Did anyone go to her orchestra concert? They have one once a quarter. Can we go to something like that as a small group and support Kelly in our small group that way? In youth group, it's really easy because teenagers are all doing extracurriculars, so it's really easy for me to know what's going on because I can pull up a school schedule. If I know Parker's on football, I can go online and do that. For you as adults, there's not typically that much organization to a rec sport or a group activity, so you have to ask somebody. But then they know that you're investing in them and you care about them if you're showing up to the extra stuff. We also want to support their needs. That's how we invest in people. So hospital visits, that's important throughout life. Now, the older classes, you're probably gonna do a lot more of that than I'm gonna do. I usually show up to an appendix or a wisdom tooth removal. You guys are probably showing up to a weekly activity. So I would spread out the love and have a couple people who just go and support people when they come home from the hospital. If you know someone's having a baby or super sick, it's really nice to take meals. If your class knows this person really well because they're showing up, taking the meal shows that our class cares about you more than you just being in the room. We care about the needs in your life. Yeah. And then the last one is planning outside hangouts for your group. I call it hangouts. This is fellowship, social time, service activities. It's important for our group to be more than just a Sunday morning group or Sunday evening group. We want to do stuff together. So there are classes that do different things. The young adults just did a service project over at First AJ. If you didn't know, ABCS is opening up a care center at First AJ, which is within 5 miles of us. So if someone needs food, clothing, stuff like that, they can go to First Apache Junction and get that done. However, they got all the stuff in big boxes and needed people to hang clothes, fold clothes, put stuff away. So our young adults group took a Saturday, they all went over there and helped Chris Baker put things away. Pastor George's class did a lunch after service a few weeks ago, and me and Candace got to join them because Candace goes to that class. And we went to Rudy's, and there was maybe 10 adults and 30 children hanging out at Rudy's, and we had a good time. I think Dave Klotz's class did a breakfast in here a few weeks ago, but it's hanging out and doing stuff together outside, because if we're doing things socially, we're going to connect, and when we get to small groups, it makes it really easy to converse with someone who you're friends with, someone who you love, someone who you enjoy, someone you want to do something with. Makes it a lot easier. All right, Kailee, it's all you.
All right, hello. All right, we're going to be talking about leader development. So in your books, please flip to that page. There are some fill in the blanks for you guys to follow along. So we're going to talk about raising up new leaders, specifically for journey groups. So my first question for you guys is, why should we raise up new leaders? So I would like you to answer this.
Take our place when we pick up.
Taking your place. Okay, awesome. What else? Why else do we raise up new leaders? What? To lead groups, yes. To make more groups and lead more groups. What other reasons? To grow them. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So there are many reasons why we would raise up new leaders. So one of those is to fill in when we're gone, whether we are going to heaven and not coming back, or we're sick, or maybe we're on vacation. We're not always going to be there to lead our group. So it is good to have someone there to fill in when we aren't there. Then multiply and begin new groups. Our goal is to reach more people with the gospel and connect those who are disconnected. So the best way we can do that is have groups available as we grow and reach more people. And then also develop disciples. Groups are a great way to connect with people closer than on a Sunday morning in a service. You get more intimate, more close, and this gives us a great opportunity to bring someone along with us and develop more disciples. So I have 5 steps for you to start developing leaders. So the first one is begin with prayer. So God calls people into leadership, not you. So we want to be praying that God will raise up new leaders and make them clear to us so we can come invite them. Their willingness needs to come from God, not because you had a really good pitch or convinced them to do it. we can get in a good habit of being like, oh yes, this is why you should do it, but we need to start with prayer and make sure this is coming from God. So my challenge for you right now, I'm actually going to have you guys individually take time to pray and ask God to, one, identify leaders around you that could be raised up, but also to, if there's someone you're developing now, and investing in, to pray for them as well. So go ahead and let's take a couple minutes and pray for that. God, we thank you for how you have allowed us to be leaders and to invest in people through small groups, God. We just pray that you would raise up leaders in the church to come and lead groups as well, that you would make those leaders clear to us, that we could start investing in them. We love you and we thank you. In your name I pray. Amen. All right, so step number 2 is identifying potential leaders. How do we know who a good leader is? First off, our requirements of Highway. So we have a couple. The first is that you are a regularly attending member of Highway. This is important. And then that they have sound doctrine. We want to make sure our leaders are teaching truth. And we want to find people who understand the gospel and understand what we believe. Then we have what I call TIP qualities, so TIP. The first is T, which is teachable. Is this individual eager to learn? Are they willing to take constructive criticism, learn new things, be developed? Then I is integrity. Is this person respectable and have good character? We want to be able to have leaders that are of good character and good standing because they're going to be leading others. And then P is for passion. Is this person passionate about the mission of Highway and reaching people with the gospel? If they're not passionate about it, they have no business leading a group. We want people that have a fire and a passion to go out after people and connect the disconnected through the gospel. So when you're looking for leaders, look for willingness rather than readiness. If we only went after leaders who are just ready, we would miss a lot of really great leaders. There's a lot of people who just need to be affirmed in these qualities that they can lead to. So right now I want you guys to take another minute. I want you to write down a few people, 1 or 2, in your life that you see that have these qualities. Maybe not a potential leader, but maybe it's someone that mentors or disciples you, that you look up to. And I want you to take a second and write those down. Okay, would anyone like to share the person or people that they wrote down? And maybe what qualities stood out in them? Oh, okay, well, I'll share mine. So, Jackie Fry, Kelcey's mom, she disciples me, and she is an awesome woman of God, and I love her. She spends a lot of time investing in me, and a lot of the things that I do and I work on in my life are because of that time I meet with her. And she is super heavy in prayer, which is one of the areas I love to pray, but in groups I really struggle to pray out loud. And she has really put a fire in me to make prayer a part of my life. And I feel like she has sparked the passion in me, and she has a lot of passion as well. So it's important to be able to see these people in our lives that we look up to, and then in ourselves, but it helps us identify those around us. So we want to be identifying potential leaders, looking for these qualities. They don't always just stick out to us right away. So the number 3 is have an I see in you conversation. So you might be asking, okay, what does that mean? So this is a conversation saying, this is what I see in you. These are the qualities that I see in you that are good. So you want to have this conversation and highlight their strengths and share your vision. What is the vision of our journey groups? So this might be a, hey, I noticed that you are really good with people. You really can talk in front of people and they listen to you, and I just wanted to affirm you in that. Or maybe it's, oh wow, you're really good at one-on-one discipleship. You connect really deeply with people, and that's really important for a leader as well. So we want to have those conversations like, hey, you have strengths to offer, and this is how they fit into the vision. People really want to be wanted, and they do desire to help and to serve. We just have to affirm them in that sometimes. And then ask them to think and pray about the decision. So once you've affirmed them and invited them along, take some time and pray about this. We don't want you just to say yes right now. Go to the Lord and see, like, is this something He would really have you do? I like to set a timeline. I think it's really important because people could pray and you won't hear from them for a year maybe or never. So I said a week. So pray about this for a week. Seek guidance from others and really figure out, is this something that you feel called to do? Is God calling you here? And then follow up. Timely, reasonably. So you set a timeline, whatever that is. Maybe you said 2 weeks. Maybe it's the 1 week. But follow up on that timeline. If you don't get back with them, they're going to be like, oh no, maybe they didn't really want me to do this. Maybe this is a sign that I'm not supposed to do it. So give them that time and respect it and follow up in that time. Too early, it's putting too much pressure on them probably. Following up like, hey, how's it going? That's a little different, but expecting a decision on your timeline is rushing them. So set your timeline and stick to it. If they say yes, great. Invite them along. Say, hey, now we can begin this training process. If they say no, which some people will say no, this isn't for everyone. Leading is hard and it's a responsibility. Still validate them in their decision because not everyone is called to lead. And then if they need more time, respect that decision and set a new timeline. And then follow up again. Repeat the process. Just because they aren't ready now doesn't mean they won't be in the future. Which brings us to number 4, set a training plan. So once you've invited them along, they've said yes, you want a training plan that's consistent. So as you bring new leaders up in your group, you want something that is consistent for each leader. So the first thing is observe regular teacher leading. So maybe they're attending your group and they're like, oh, I already observed you. This is not what I'm talking about. Taking 2 to 4 weeks of intentional time of here's the lesson, I want you to look at it, and then come watch me teach and see how I interact with the group. So being very intentional about that. So observe regular teacher leading. Then allow them to teach. Teach with supervision. You want them to be able to practice. You can't just watch and then just dive right in and it's great. So let them teach with supervision. I do 4 weeks for this. I've seen that's a really good amount of time of consistent teaching. And then after each lesson, evaluate with them. What did you do well? What could you work on? Where do we go from here? And then it brings us to the final evaluation of strengths and their growing edges. So after the month, you want to see, all right, here's where we're at. And this is what you need to improve on. And then decide from there, are we ready to put you into a group? If not, spend more time. Let them lead. Maybe they need more one-on-one training. And then number 5, release into leadership. So once you've decided someone is ready, then it's time to let them lead. And this is going to be different for each group, but give them the opportunity to lead, whether it's co-leading a current group. So maybe you don't have enough people to start a new group or we don't have another group available. Let them co-lead with you. Don't just put them on the sideline for so long. It takes practice to be a good leader, and we want the group to be able to see them like, hey, this is one of your leaders. Then plant a new group. We are growing here at Highway. We hope that more people will get involved in groups, but we'll need more groups to do that, which means we need more leaders. So raising up new ones for new groups. Then there's the option to divide your current group into 2 groups. As our groups get bigger, it's harder to accommodate a larger group size. So we might want to raise up a new leader to divide a new group to allow more growth. So studies have shown that the ideal group format is 2 leaders per group with 4 to 10 students in that group. And the reason for this is that it shows that under 4 people, it's really hard to get people involved. Only the leader talks. So we want a few more than 4. But over 10, that's when conversation starts to struggle, and we don't want that. So whether it is we have a few people who talk the most and other people are just being left out, or those people don't feel comfortable talking in a larger group. I know for me personally, I really don't like talking. If other people are gonna talk, I'll let them talk. So research has shown this, and we apply this to our young adult groups. We've now divided our groups a few times and have 5 separate young adult groups that are in between that 4 to 10. We've noticed this because as soon as our groups start getting above 12, we're like, wow, things are not running as well as they could. People aren't getting involved. We have some people that just sit and don't interact at all in the group. So the moment we get to consistently over 10 people, we talk about, is it time to divide our group up? And this just supports our goal to reach new people with the gospel and connect the disconnected. And then you want to continue investing through discipleship. Like I said, small groups are a great way to disciple others. You're tight-knit, you get to learn people better, who they are, and training someone up, raising someone up into leadership is a great step in that. So you've already invested in them this far, why not continue that? And be the example like, hey, we want to make disciples. We are commanded to make disciples, so why not start it with the leadership? So I do have some discussion questions for you guys. They're on the screen, they're in your books. I'd like you to take some time at your tables to go through those and just talk about what you learned from the 5 steps we just talked about. All right, let's go ahead and bring it back. So I did want to bring up one thing about when we divide groups. So divide, plant, whatever you want to look, whatever word best suits you for that. So the reason why we do this is to help grow our groups. We want more groups for more people. We want opportunity for people to connect deeper. And so when you guys hear this, I don't want you to think, oh no, if our group is planted or divided, whatever, that you never get to hang out with these people again. Young adults always think that, and then we do it and they're like, oh yeah, we go out to lunch every Sunday together. So you can still do service projects and hangouts and lunches together. We actually start our groups together. We do announcements for the week, prayer, and then we go to our separate classrooms. So dividing or planting doesn't have to be, oh no, we'll never see them again. It makes us uncomfortable sometimes, but that's okay. We're not meant to be comfortable. We want to reach people with the gospel, and we want to connect disconnected people. So just keep that in mind. So I do have a couple books that I really love. Leading Others. This is a great book if you're looking to start discipling somebody. It is a workbook. So you go through, you fill out answers, and then there's a section for the person that's discipling you, or you would be the discipler. So there's a section just for you to walk through with the person. So if you've never discipled someone or mentored someone before, this is a great start. It helps you learn that process better. So I highly recommend this one. And then transformational groups. I just read this. I think it's amazing. It has a lot of research, a lot of statistics, and just a lot of really great concepts about leading groups and why groups are so important and what things we should be prioritizing when we're doing it. So this is great if you're already a leader. I recommend this one very highly. So those 2 books. They're up here if you want to see them. They're on the screen if you want to write them down. But that's all I have for you, and we're actually going to do some more prizes now. So this is for a free drink from the Missions Cafe. Kelcey won't ring it, I promise. Arthea. All right, for another free drink, Joshua Dow. They get to make their own drinks. Love it. All right, and then for the Pastor's Bible, leather bound. I think it only has 1 ribbon, but it's okay. I heard earlier you can glue in your own extra ribbons. Oh, it has 3 ribbons. Never mind. It's the Pastor Bible.
Father, Son, and Spirit.
I don't have one. Chris Tenney. Ooh.
Man, there's probably a good sermon illustration, a 3-ribbon Bible. Guys, thank you so much for coming out today. You don't know how important